Okay, Larry, why Tenkara for you, especially with kind of bigger fish?
Well, with Tenkara, it simplifies things a little bit and allows you to get better drifts. So, being able to get a better drift with a rod often invites bigger fish too. Because they're especially like the Provo here, they're very picky. Been caught and released many times, and so the better drift you can get, the more fish you're going to catch, and bigger fish. But for the bigger fish, I go to carry rods, which is the longer rods, generally say 15 to 20 plus feet long. Usually a little stiffer than regular Tenkara rods too. That gives you the backbone that you need for a little heavier tippets, bigger fish, heavier water, bigger water, that sort of thing. And they help you fight the big fish because of that stiffer butt section in it. But you also have the light tip, which you can protect light tippets down to 6X tippets just fine, even with the bigger rods. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, can you use streamers? Can you nymph? Can you use dry flies with,
hmm
with Tenkara rods?
Yeah, in fact, I don't do the traditional wet fly fishing with Tenkara very often. I mostly nymph fish with it, and then occasionally do dry flies, dry droppers, or streamers with it.
Well, now, what is a wet fly technique?
Well, the wet fly is it's mainly for the mountain streams in the summertime when you have a lot of good hatches coming off, especially caddis and mayflies. Um, the nymphs that are swimming up toward the surface, the emerger type part of the hatch before they get to the surface. A lot of fish feed on that stage, and the wet flies that they use are very simple. It's just the body with a soft hackle on the front.
Yeah,
Traditional
they have kind of a weird
reverse hackle
like
that
a
allows you to
yeah,
pulse it.
yeah,
If you twitch the rod,
yeah.
and it helps draw some strikes. But you're pretty much just popping it in behind rocks and along the banks, and trying to imitate those hatching insects.
Which we would probably try and do that in Chile with some of the real deep behind boulder pocket water that they
hmm
have in those wild streams down there.
Right.
So, but you say that you primarily nymph with the
Probably 90% of what I do with Tenkara or carrier rods is nymph fish.
is that right? And that's what we're going to do today.
hmm
How about streamers? How often do you use it with
I'll
streamers?
use streamers too. I tend to use them more on a regular fly rod just because um, some of the fish you get on streamers are real big, and you need to let them run, and it's harder to do with the 10 car rods. But um, I've landed, Alaska salmon and big, those oversized rainbow trout up there on 10 car rods. So,
Have
um,
you?
mhm. So I know they can handle some big fish. Carp fish for them. A lot of people use them for carp,
What
which are
weight then are you talking
big,
about?
hard running fish. Um, the fish weight, you mean?
Yes, sir.
The fish weight would be I've caught them up to maybe 8 pounds on 10 car rods.
8 pounds. Okay.
Trout and salmon, and then um, when I was up in Alaska using 10 car, I didn't have any of the really big heavy 10 car rods, or carrier rods, so I didn't go after some of the bigger like silvers and stuff, but got the sockeye salmon and humpies and that sort of thing,
Yeah. See,
and the
we have.
rainbows up to about 24 inches.
What I was hoping to see, we have sea run browns,
hmm
and we've got a big river there called the Palena River, and we have huge rainbows and browns that come out of that. But then
hmm
in our fjord in front of us, we have wahoo, and those things are 30 and 40 pounds and fight like tigers.
hmm
And I'm just dreaming, is there any way that I could try and land a wahoo on any kind of a Karoo or
Wahoo are
sea run?
known for really hard runs, so I would not expect you're gonna get anything but a baby on a
Okay,
10
all
car
right.
type rod.
But
There,
that's my goal. I'm going to catch one.
you can do it, but you'd want a big rod, even bigger than that one, maybe,
Really?
and something that can handle minimum of 2X tippet. Probably 0X would be better.
Okay.
The problem with heavy tippets on telescopic rods is that when a fish pulls hard, it jams the sections together, and you might not be able to retract them.
Yeah, I've had that happen.
That's the main problem with going with heavy tippet on Tenkara rods.
And then dry fly fishing seems to be ideal for this if you're just dipping, like dancing a caddis
Mm-hmm.
on the surface of the water or
Mm-hmm.
something, isn't it? Isn't that
Perfect for almost any dry fly fishing or dry with a nymph hanging underneath it.
yeah?
For pocket water fishing, it's perfect for that.
Now tell me, am I wrong? I've skipped the leader side of things. What I've done is I just have a fly line and then I tie tippet to it.
That's pretty much what I do too. When I nymph fish, I use a long tippet though, like 10 feet long, tied to the end of the fly line because I like to fish deep quite often. And so I usually put the strike indicator, if I use an indicator, up on the line itself. And then I like a long tippet and untapered, pretty much. The reason I like untapered is because heavy leader tends to get buoyed up in the current and won't sink as fast. So if you use a tapered leader, you're going to have to use heavier line and you still won't get as good a drift. So I use mainly tippet, thinner material that slices through the water easier and sinks easier with less weight.
Okay. And then like during the winter now, what would you be nymphing with?
In the winter, there's tons of midges in the river here in La Provo,
Okay.
but there's also uh, the aquatic shrimp, the sow bugs and scuds that live in the river, and a lot of them are really tiny. Um, you've got the aquatic worms, this, people call them San Juan worms. You've got eggs drifting in the river like this time of year because from the spawning brown trout, just like the eggs, in Alaska attract the big rainbow trout. They attract fish here too.
Can you show those to me today?
Sure.
Yeah.
And
Have them in your box or
mm-hmm.
fly box? Great. Okay. And then in terms of line, the actual line itself, do you use a braided line or do you just
I started out with braided lines, furled lines, but I don't like them for much except for tiny dry flies. And the reason for that is they just don't float very well in my estimation. I use a monofilament shooting line from that actually has a hollow core in it. It's kind of an interesting line, but it's actually got 6 air chambers in a monofilament, and so it's in essence the lightest floating line out there, and it makes a good line for most Tenkara type fishing that I do. And then I put on a leader link, one of those little silver rings, and then from there go down to tippet. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Well, when I have done dry fly fishing with it, which has not been much because I got into this too late to give it a try, but I don't even have leader in the water. I'm just dancing the dry fly
Mm-hmm.
on top. But
Mm-hmm.
you actually fish it where you're floating the line a little bit as well. And that's why you need
Depends on how far away you are.
Okay.
There's a certain distance where you can keep the most of the line up off the water. But if you get a little further out than that, then you're creating tension on the line and it's dragging it. So then I drop the rod down and just do like a regular fly line where I let it float on the water surface.
I learned really quick that if you have too much line, you can't get the fish in.
Yeah.
Now you talked about a technique of getting close enough that you put your arm out, you use your
Mm-hmm.
hand, and you keep pressure off of the hand so that you're not causing any tightness on the line, so that if the fish runs, you don't lose them.
You play them mostly in till they're fairly tired. Then you move the rod one way and guide the line to your hand. Don't grab it, just guide it in. Mm-hmm. And so you got the bent rod going around your hand in down to the fish.
Yeah.
And so you got the bend of the rod and your hand are both playing the fish.
Yes.
And that gives you some nice options to get them in close. Once the fish slows down, if he goes crazy, you just let go and fight him again and bring him back in again. But once he slows down and gets tired, then you guide the line in, tuck the rod under your arm, pinch the leader in the last few feet, I say pinch because you want to use that as like a drag.
Yes.
If you grab it tight, they're gonna one shake of their head, they're gonna break you right off. So you just let them take it if they want it. If they start shaking, you know why you're trying to get them in. Bring them in close, reach down, let them go without even touching the fish, or you can net them if you want to, if you want to get a picture or something.
Yeah, I have had that happen more than once, but the problem I've noticed is that there's so much line. I couldn't get them close enough to even grab the line.
Mm-hmm.
So I've
Too much line is hard to deal with.
yeah.
You can fish further out and cover more water, but it's harder to play a fish in and get them in close when you got too much line. So you got to find a happy medium where you got enough line to get out and fish the water you want, but not so much that you can't land a fish.
Now, yesterday when I caught those nice browns, they were just on. I didn't feel the hit. I didn't set the hook. They were. They were just on. So I mean, with Tenkara, and it's so soft. That tip is so soft. How do you know if you have a strike, and what do you do to set the hook?
Well, here on the Provo, the fish take it and spit it out in about half a second because most of them have been caught 50 to 100 times this year already. So,
Really?
so they learn if it doesn't taste like food, get rid of it fast. And so you got to be quick on the draw. And so I use visual references, meaning a strike indicator or a sighter built into the leader that helps you know exactly when they take it. Now, fish can just get on, because you've got almost a tight line when you're nymph fishing, but you got to have enough slack to get a dead drift still. But the current helps tighten it up that remainder once the fish hits, and you can have them on without setting the hook even sometimes.
So we'll be hopefully learning some of that today. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Good. What about? Do you have any suggestions for brand of rod? Do you use one in particular? Or do you use a lot of them? Or?
For longer rods, I like the Carrier rods. I started out with the Tenkara USA because they were the first ones out, and um, actually before that, I used some uh, old panfish rods way back in the '80s. They were telescopic. Um, Not they weren't carbon graphite though; they were just fiberglass, and so they're heavy and whippy. Weren't much fun to fish with, but the extra length, I fished nymphing rigs on the Provo here and did really well. But like I had a 20-footer that must have weighed, almost a pound because it was fiberglass, not carbon graphite. And so it was just not much fun to fish. So I quit doing that until Tenkara USA came out. And then they had some, great high quality carbon graphite rods. So I went with them, and they have some up to almost 15 feet, but they tend to be kind of soft action, for the soft tackle flies. The Imago though is a little stiffer, which is a good nymphing rod. That's 13 and a half feet.
What about the one called the Provo?
That's one I helped him design from Kieryu rods, and it's a 16-footer with a good backbone, and can handle up to say 4x tippets. You can probably go heavier than that, but then you risk, jamming the pieces together. But it's heavy duty enough that hello there, puppy. Heavy duty enough that you can land big fish on it, and that's what it was designed for. So you can bring in a 20+ inch trout if you want to, or even a salmon or something if the salmon doesn't run too far.
Could you show me your fly snare?
Mm-hmm.
Just what you